Hi, welcome back to the CI/CD tutorial. So, in the previous section, we learned a little bit about YAML, yet another markup language, and how it's used as a generic plain text, human readable, computer friendly format that allows you to configure anything. What we want to do in this particular video is talk about how it applies to GitLab CI/CD. So we're going to go ahead and open up the YAML and CI thing that we have here. So let's take a look at an example of what the GitLab CI YAML looks like. This is going to be one of those very short videos that doesn't have any particular exercise using the terminal. So what we're going to do now is go over what these YAML examples look like for the GitLab CI. So what we have here is an example configuration. So let's go ahead and read this. We're specifying a key called image. It has a value which is a string called /gcc make. We'll talk more about the context or details of what that means later. The next key that we have here is the before script. This key happens to be a list of strings such as make directory build, and in this case it's specifying a list of commands that will be executed before the actual script runs. Then the next thing that we have here is a key called build code. This key has a value which is a dictionary uh, pointing to a list here. In this case we have a script which points to cd build, cmake source, and then cmake build. Now, one little thing that I want to highlight is that in GitLab CI YAML, script commands are a little bit special. Sometimes, as we mentioned already in the YAML section, there are commands that need to be wrapped in single or double quotes. Sometimes commands will contain a colon that needs to be wrapped in quotes so that the YAML parser knows how to interpret the whole thing as a string, as I mentioned before. There are also some other special characters that you need to be aware of. When in doubt, try to wrap this either in a multi-line string or use quotes to ensure that the YAML will parse it correctly. At the end of the day, this entire structure that we have here is relatively simple and human readable, which is why YAML is used for CI configuration. In this particular case, what is this YAML seeing with this configuration that we just looked at? So this configuration is using cmake and make. It defines a single job called build code. That job has an arbitrary job name, and there are different commands that can be executed in it. Before any script that is being done, we have a before script, which is aptly named before script. And that's it. That's entirely what this job is doing. It also runs this entire job in a Docker image which it pulls from Docker Hub. This is /gcc make. So now that we've got an idea of what an example file looks like, let's just talk a little bit about the overall structure. So you can see here that we're going to define 3 different jobs. We're not going to talk about the parameters of those jobs yet, but we're just going to talk about how this YAML file is generally structured. What we do is we specify jobs by particular names. These names are generally arbitrary. However, there are particular names you are not allowed to use, which you see in this list below, such as default, image, services, stages, type, before script, after script, variables, and cache. These are names that your jobs cannot have because these are already used by other top level configurations for the GitLab CI. By default, all of these jobs that you run at the top level will run in parallel. If you want to run them in serial or a mix of parallel and serial and so on in some sort of complex directed acyclic graph structure and so on, we'll cover this later in a different section. For now, we're going to talk about jobs running in parallel, but we'll get to the point where we can start doing things in serial and parallel. So, let's go ahead and look at some of these global names that we have here. So if we took that previous CI example, we can add in another global name called stages. And we can define stages as a list of 3 strings: build, test, deploy. We will get to stages in a later section of this tutorial. The other thing that I want to mention is that when I refer to particular variables, because I like to use the GitLab CI convention, we use a colon to denote the scope. So, for example, if I want to refer to the image of job2, I can say job2 colon image. And this overrides the image at the top level, which I refer to as colon image, where a prefix colon here means the root level of the YAML file. Jobs can also have various parameters. There are a ton of parameters that jobs can have. You've already seen one so far, which is called script. However, there's a lot more. So if you click the configuration parameters of the GitLab CI docs, which contains a lot, you can see all of these different parameters that jobs can have. Each of these are clickable, so you can go ahead and click on a parameter to see it in the documentation. Let's go ahead and check out script for an example. You can see the script being used and an example of how it's used in the documentation. You can see that GitLab CI docs wrap it in double quotes just to be safe, but they also mention that there are lots of different things that you can do with it, such as a single value or a list of values. And they show you lots of different things that you can do. You can see, for an example, GitLab CI YAML has an example of that extra code in order to prevent it from failing, for example. This is their example of it. Anyway, these documentations exist for you to go through on your own time. We're not going to go through them explicitly. Hopefully, you should be able to understand how to use this reference. And next, we're actually going to go ahead and start our exercise by writing our first GitLab CI YAML file. So tune in next time.